Yeah. Let me actually finish, not start. But yeah, thank you very much for today's discussions. Actually, presentations of the discussions you did in the last months, and I have to underline points from this point, because you said number of issues underline important. The first is because we heard what the young generation thought about the European Union, and what the young generation thought about the future of the European Union. And that's pretty important, because the young voices had to be heard. And I usually use the proverb, which is quite common in this region, like for evil to prevail, it is enough for good to remain silent. So I believe that you cannot stay silent. You have to outline what is important for you as a young generation. And that's the topic which are intersectional, which are currently discussed within the Conference on the Future of Europe. And I believe that even as Lilibel said, when your talk had not been translated, you cannot stay silent. Please be talking and we will hear you. So that's very important, that the issues which are of your interest of the younger generation will be public, will become more raising awareness. And I know it's a long journey to go with the topics as the migration, respecting the principle of non-refoulement, with the prevention of the migration and the forced migration due to the environment problems. I know that the Green Deal in the practice will last more than a generation to get what we in some manner had not been able to sustain. But what is important is there are still people, there is a still generation of persons who will not forget on what is important for the humankind to sustain. And that's the topics which are going on the industrial value, going beyond the economic well-being, which are important because there are some values the European Union is based on. And that's the principle of the protection of the human rights and even the promotion of the human rights. It's widest range, including the right for sustainable environment. There is the principle of the necessity of non-discrimination in its broadened sense. And there is also the question of the climate transition to a more sustainable way. Even a decade ago, Ban Ki-moon said that we don't have a planet B. And we should be aware that since that, the decade of years just passed, and we are still somehow stepping 2 steps forwards, 1 step back. And I believe that the European Union, including the young leaders, can be the example how to proceed further, how to proceed in a way that the policies and the legislation will go hand in hand with our values. So I think that what you mentioned, even your colleagues in the latest discussion, that the law should be adopted in a sustainable way, that the policies have to be implemented in this sense. That's the only way how to make the European Union sustainable, how to make the overall the law and policies. We have to look at the interlink between the values and its implementation, and that we should not resign on the raising awareness of the topics which are important for the European Union, for the young generation, and for the mankind itself, because those are creating and influencing our daily life. Of course, there are a number of hand in hand interlinked with this, but in the moment, without respecting every human being, without respecting that everyone is entitled for a sustainable environment and for safe, is not safe for us. We have to be aware that the European Union has a potential, and we have a generation which is able, or which can be able to talk awareness actually participate on that. And after today's presentations from the morning up to now, up this moment, I believe that there are enough people who can continue and who can sustain the message that we have to respect and sustain the European Union as the peace project based on the values. And that's the most important message I heard several times from you. I'm happy that we had been a part of this project to help the young leaders and young voices to be heard, even within this platform, and to contribute to the young participation in the EU policy making itself. Thank you very much for that good feeling at the end of the day for me, but with a sustainable message for everyone who had been able to participate or then later heard afterwards. Thank you very much. Jim?
Thank you very much, Lucia. I would first of all like to thank the European Parliament for funding this fantastic project on citizen outreach. The implementing partners, of course, they have all been present and very active here. Obviously also the TEPSA Secretariat. And I want to very warmly congratulate the winners of the students contest. I think it's fantastic, and I think they have really brought a great contribution. The closing conference today shows that this EP4U project has been extremely valuable in reaching out to citizens, and particularly to young people, thinking about the future, about Europe. Benjamin Tallis's presentation, I think, set the framework. It was very inspiring, thought-provoking, and a bit provocative, which I think interventions of this type should be. It had all the right ingredients for lively debate. The panels allowed us to delve into some particularly important policies. They were all key areas for the future of the European Union, and I must say that I listened carefully, and I learned quite a bit, actually. I will not go into the detail of the themes, obviously. I'll more talk about the overall environment and the need for reinventing the European model. Maybe a word on citizens' involvement. It has been something quite big over the last years. There was this conference on the future of Europe, which was launched under rather murky political conditions, but it has actually proved to be useful. I think the lesson we can draw from this is that there is a demand for more active involvement of citizens, and we should build on this experience. What I liked about it was that there was a confrontation of citizens and experts. This is very important. And also it was a process which went on for some time. It was not a one-off event. The second lesson is, if you look at what the citizens have come up with, and of course, among the citizens, there were some young, because it was a balanced panel, they are primarily interested in debating policies and concrete measures. There's a lot of talk about treaty change, but that is not, I think, what the proposals were about. 95% of them can be done without treaty change. Now, let me say a word about youth more particularly. It is so important to associate youth, obviously. I mean, it's a cliche, but it's really important, and I think this project is great in that way. If you look at the abstention rates, for instance, in the French elections now, and more generally, it's higher in the youth class than elsewhere. That means we have a problem, frankly. If I may say this in this context, for me, citizenship means rights. It also means duties and a sense of responsibility. And so this is something I hope more and more young will actually understand, that it's very nice to reflect on the EU, but if you don't translate it into elections in our representative democracy system, nothing is going to work. Benjamin Tallis talked about new inspiration for Europe, and this reminds me of something which the great poet, German poet Goethe once said. He said in German, "Was du ererbt von deinen Vätern, wird es, es zu besitzen," which means what you inherit from your elders, you have to acquire it so as to make it your own. In other words, you have to reinvent it. Now, European integration has been inspiring from the start, I think, and I would say to David, I think to Benjamin, that it still is, but there are challenges. Actually, we've had three historic phases. The first phase was up till '89, when under the umbrella of the American protection and NATO, we could indulge in concentrating on economic reconstruction and values. Then, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, we entered a different phase where we thought the end of history had come. The Europeans were fierce protagonists of this idea, because it looked as though our kind of postmodernism and liberal democracy had triumphed. Of course, very quickly we had the Yugoslav wars, and then we've had a whole lot of crises from 2008, which in my view is the third phase. In this phase, which started with the subprime crisis, which actually called into question some of the tenets of our economic system. Then, of course, the Georgian crisis, which opened up a can of worms, as we've seen now, leading to the war in Ukraine, and all the other crises. Now, Benjamin talked about the rise of protective security in this context and was critical about it. It is true that the EU, confronted with all of those challenges, started openly talking about a protective Europe, the need to protect, to preserve, and to work on its own resilience. Now, that sounds a bit reactionary in a way, but to me, it's a natural reaction in a situation of crisis. That's what leaders do in that case, especially also when they're confronted to powers like China, Turkey, Russia, and even sometimes, I must say, the United States, that do not always share our approach on all the values. Where Benjamin is right is that there is a risk of turning inward, or too much inward again, and being too defensive. Maybe my message is the following. I think the reinvention of the European model, in my view, could precisely lie in finding a new balance, reconciling progressive and protective elements, idealism or values, and interests and realism. We must find a new way of linking a vision to policy making. A vision without a policy, I agree with that, or instruments to defend our vision, will not work in the world we are living in. Power politics and realpolitik as objectives per se, without an inspiring vision and deep rooting in key values, will not be sustainable, and anyway will lead us into a direction which is incompatible with the DNA of European integration and the EU. The unfolding events in Ukraine are powerful incentive, as was rightly observed during the course of today, to look at all the elements in an imaginative way. It means not only focusing on risks and dangers. You have to focus on dangers, obviously, any leader has to do it, but you should also see that there is an opportunity to concentrate on opportunities and positive sides, on having the European model again as a beacon of progress and stability. It will not be an easy debate, I'll tell you immediately, and you will see this in the upcoming European Council meeting in a few days' time, but we need this debate. It is an opportunity to re-inject dynamism, to develop a new vision, combined with hard-headed policy making, a functioning governance, and the injection of the right means and instruments to achieve our objectives. Let me conclude by saying that TEPSA, which is an incredible network across the whole of Europe, not only the EU, but also the neighboring parts of Europe, has a key part to play in promoting the debate, injecting ideas and suggestions. The success of this EP4U project shows that collectively we can bring real added value. We will try to do even more and even better in the future. Thank you very much.